Alright, so in this video, what I want to talk about is taking the slack out the bar and how to do that and why it's important to do that. When you're learning these lifts, like the deadlifts, cleans or snatches, and even some people who've been doing it a long time, they don't take the slack out the bar well, which means they're not creating enough tension and they're not technically moving well off the floor. Arguably, the setup position is the most important part of the lift. So that being taking the slack out the bar becomes very important because how well you start is usually how well you finish a lift. The reason we want to take the slack out the bar in your cleans, deadlifts or snatches or any movement off the floor is because it builds technical efficiency, right? If you're technically efficient in your lift, then you're going to use less energy in a way and you're going to move more load more efficiently, thus saving more energy for more reps, more load, etc. What we want to do by taking this slack out the bar is it helps you to create tension and transfer force efficiently. We need that force to be transferred down into the floor, and you need to be able to create tension through your muscular and ligaments, mostly obviously the bigger muscles like the legs or quads, hamstring, glutes, and then also your core and lats or back muscle groups, all right? Before we actually go into the barbell, the loaded barbell, I want to talk about how this looks with the empty barbell. So when we take the slack out the bar, we will be able to create a technically efficient lift, yeah? And what that looks like is your hip position staying lowest for as long as possible because you're going to transfer that force downwards, and your shoulders staying higher than the hips and your hips being higher than the knee. As you're transferring up, you'll still maintain that position until you bring the hip to the bar and lock your quads out and stand up tall. What happens if you don't take the slack out the bar and that you get an inefficient transfer of force or you're not creating enough tension is your hip will kick out, so that hip torque will go the wrong direction. Your shoulders and chest will be left hanging over the bar. So now my hips and shoulders are too close together and you end up kind of rounding out with this weird sort of lift, right? We have to realize that our hip creates torque, which is reciprocal force. That force has to go one of three places: sideways if you're not compressing with your core enough, down to the floor, or up to the sky. The most efficient place for it to go is down to the floor because you're going to transfer all of your force that you're creating in your hips into the floor so you can move the weight up towards you. Again, if we transfer that force well with the hips, by taking the slack out first, creating tension between us, the bar and the floor, and all of the ligaments and musculature, we're going to stand up and move technically well because we've got that hip torque traveling in the wrong direction. If that hip torque goes in the wrong direction because you're not taking the slack out the bar, you're not creating tension or transferring force in the right direction, hip torque goes that way, and you're going to end up finishing with weird lift. If your hip torque goes sideways, you usually get a transfer of force into the lower back, and that's how you can get an injury. Okay, so bringing this down to the barbell. So what happens is, or what's going on here, where there's slack in the bar, is this metal ring on the plate, there is a gap between the actual barbell and where it sits. So it'll be sitting at the bottom of the plate right now, yeah? So there will be a little bit of movement. You won't be able to hear it so much on the camera, but there is space that you can pull the bar up to the top of the inside ring, right? So that is the slack that we want to take out. So going over to this side, you might actually be able to hear this side a bit more. So you can probably hear that on camera. So that's the space that we don't want when we're lifting off the floor, right? So now what does that look like when we're actually doing a lift off the floor? Taking the slack out, what that means is, obviously, if we're going to set up in a normal deadlift with the shoulders over the bar directly, and then the bar set up about where your laces are mid-foot, yeah? So take a moment to pull your hip down. That's going to pull the hip torque into the floor. And then as you do that, you can kind of pull on the bar with your lats. Arms go long, and the bar will move to the top of the ring. So if you do that together, that's the bar. Now we're taking the slack out. I'm nice and tight. And if you do that well, that position is quite uncomfortable because there's a lot of tension in your legs, a lot of tension in your lats, and everything is engaged, right? So slack comes out the bar, nice and tight, transfer the weight into the floor, and then finish out. And even with that, you can notice how we spoke about before, if I'm moving technically efficiently, hip is transferring downwards, but my chest and shoulders is traveling up, and they're coming up together in one movement, yeah? So one more time. Slack comes out the bar, nice and tight, push the ground away, chest up, finish out, lock your quads, hip to the bar, back down.